It's The World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. Joining us, reporter and news editor Anne Bagamary.
Hello.
Thanks for being with us. Thanks as well to Georg Blume, Paris correspondent for Die Zeit. How are you, sir?
Thank you. Fine.
Dorian Malovic, Asia editor for French daily newspaper La Croix.
Hello, good evening.
Nice to see you.
Yep.
And freelance photojournalist Amar Abed Rabo, just back from Beirut.
Exactly, a few days ago.
We'll talk about Lebanon a little bit later on. The World This Week on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag World This Week. So many questions about those impeachment hearings. Will the Democrats call more witnesses? Is the evidence enough to impeach the president? Will it sway voters in the general election? And also, why is this man smiling? Gordon Sondland turned out to be the star witness of the week, a Trump campaign donor come U.S. ambassador to the European Union, who seemed, well, almost congenial as he crucified everyone who played a role in that July phone call between the president and his Ukrainian counterpart.
Was there a quid pro quo? With regard to the requested White House call and the White House meeting, the answer is yes. Everyone was in the loop.
Everyone was in the loop, Anne Bagamary, and yet it's not enough to change the dial on this.
Probably not, only because there's such a partisan division, not just in the country, but also in both houses of Congress. It's really interesting to see how relaxed Gordon Sondland looked.
Why was he like that?
Well, commentators have written a lot about how he looked finally like a man who was about to unburden himself, slip off the shackles, and not have to turn himself into a pretzel in order to explain what was going on, defend what was going on. It looked like he finally felt free just to be who he was. And let's face it, at this point, he probably didn't have much to lose. He'd already ticked off an awful lot of people on both sides of the aisle. First, for the Democrats, by being not totally forthcoming or being reluctant to, and changing his private testimony. This public testimony differs in some significant ways from what he said in committee. And one of the Democrats on the panel actually called him on that. So he's got no friends among the Democrats, or very few. He probably doesn't have any friends in the White House anymore. He does have a career behind him. He's probably got enough to live on. He's not going to sleep on the street. Why not, finally, after all this, just simply say whatever's on his mind? And as you can see, he did.
And he did, and yet Republicans claim there's no smoking gun. Nobody's said that Trump gave the order directly.
Well, how many times, and this is also a point that's been made by lawyers on the panel and also in commentary, how many times do you actually have a smoking gun? I think everybody has been done a great disservice by lawyer television shows where the guilty party breaks down on the stand and says everything. Or in a situation where the guilty party has a gun on someone and then takes those last 5 minutes before pulling the trigger to explain everything he did wrong. It doesn't happen like that. Hearsay is what the Republicans are claiming all this is. It's hearsay. It's inadmissible. Well, in the first place, everything is hearsay. Somebody said something and somebody heard it. So I don't think you can really say that there may not be a smoking gun. It is probably the case there's enough there to impeach the president. But to be perfectly honest, if you go along straight party lines, there was enough to impeach the president before this even started.
Gail Bloom, 5 days of testimony over 2 weeks. What have you learned?
Yeah, it's a continuous non-story, I think. I mean, all the evidence is that in the public mind, the president is more or less profiting and, is not getting criticized more or less than before. And it's a story from Ukraine. Who knows Ukraine in Iowa and in Pennsylvania, and those who's going to decide if Trump continues to be president or not. I hear about all these campaigns by the Republicans centered to voters in Iowa and Pennsylvania, in those states where it really counts and where they're saying this is all unnecessary and that it's against an American nation, this impeachment. I really fear they are going to win with that strategy.
With the U.S. president seizing on part of what Gordon Sondland said, Donald Trump opting to reach for his notes in reading the bit of the testimony he liked the best.
I say to the ambassador in response, I want nothing I want no quid pro quo. Tell Zelensky, President Zelensky, to do the right thing. So here's my answer. I want nothing. I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo. Tell Zelensky to do the right thing.
Dorian Malovic?
You know, for me, I mean, in the same vein of what you were saying, I mean, for me, the worst thing about that is we are all laughing on that. I mean, it could have been fun if we are at a theater or in a movie. Looks like a movie, but it's not movie, it's reality. And it's the President of the United States of America. And then it has been like this for months, right?
Yeah.
For years.
Yeah, forgotten in all of this are the consequences for Ukraine.
Absolutely.
Yes, and then and then Russia is behind everything, and now it's on Ukraine. And then, well, you had so many stories on what it did wrong, about, you know, so many topics, you know, about the womanizing, about so many things. He's still here, and we are still laughing, and now there is no credibility, but he's still the president. And then there is the election next year, and you have China, and you have North Korea coming next year, and you have a lot of very hard topics about Iran, and this guy is just making fun of him. You know, it's just pity.
Have we fallen into the trap of treating this as journalists like entertainment?
Maybe it's the same week. I mean, it's something funny because he's talking about the son. I mean, the whole story is about the son of Biden. And the same week, Trump was tweeting something about his own son, promoting a book or promoting something very private. So it's, it is a kind of comedy. It's a kind of very, very bad comedy, actually, yes.
I'm falling into a time warp here. I was in Europe for the first time in my life in 1973, the summer of the Watergate hearings, the summer of there's a cancer on the presidency. And rather than watching it on television, I used to get letters from my father saying, here's what's happened this week. There is a fascination in America with presidents who cross over what we all think is a very, very strict line. Presidents need to behave in a certain way, and when they don't, we are not amused. What is interesting to me is that outside of the United States of America, at least in 1973, everybody was amused. Everybody said, "What's the matter with you people? You're a young country. Of course, a president is going to be corrupt." Well, we're a lot of years after that, and I am still seeing the same dynamic.
And just
within the United States, there's a lot of anger about this.
And just to answer Georg's point, the political theater we've seen over the last 2 weeks, is it unnecessary, or should we have more of it? Should we have more people testify?
Well, that is a question that's being brought up now. The Democrats, they are talking about it, and we haven't seen a decision yet, but they're talking about cutting it off.
Don't give the blame to the Democrats. Give the blame also to us, the media, the journalists, who want to continue on this story.
No.
Impeachment is such a beautiful story for all of us.
Now, that's the same argument that's made that the mainstream newspapers and the mainstream television stations love this dysfunctional presidency because people tune in and buy subscriptions, and so we love it. We don't love it. It's not our job to be in love with a story. It's our job to cover a story.
Yes,
this is not happening
we can
because
find stories which are more important.
Well, we are talking about more important things, and we're going to talk about more important things here tonight.
Let's talk about other stories.
Yes, François.
The Call It a Witch Hunt playbook, by the way, rolled by a close ally of Donald Trump, Israel's longest ever serving prime minister, fighting for political survival after a 3-year probe by an attorney general that he appointed handed up a formal indictment on corruption charges.
A day in which the Attorney General decides to serve an indictment against the seated Prime Minister for serious crimes of corrupt governance is a heavy and sad day for the Israeli public and for me personally.
Tonight we are witnessing an attempted coup against the Prime Minister, using false accusations and a systematically tainted and biased investigation.
He slightly rolled back the attempted coup line since, saying we'll let the courts decide. But again, this line that the system's rigged or they're out to get me, you sort of get a whiff of that in that clip we heard.
Yeah, but I think, well, we have now King Bibi, you know, and we had Trump a few seconds before. They are answering the same way, saying, oh, it's a coup against me, my enemies, and it's a trap, and it's something behind it. I'm not guilty. It's always the same story.
But is it a winning recipe? He could ride this, right?
You know, but I think many people know how domestic politics works in Israel. I mean, for months we knew that he was, he had problems. Now he's convicted, he's charged, right? But now, okay, that's the end of the day. That's the end of it for him. And now we have another political theater for me.
That makes a great. That's the Attorney General, taking decisions, and it's very different from what has happened in the U.S.
Yeah,
I think that feels like the end of Netanyahu. That really, for the first time, you have a feeling he's gonna not succeed in get. I feel when Schroeder got elected, he thought he could get through with somehow, and it feels like Netanyahu still thinks he's elected and can get through, and now he is he has the justice of the country against him, and that is
the same way as Trump. I mean, but it's more legitimate than with Trump. I agree.
What's more legitimate, the accusation or the ground Netanyahu stands on? Because under the Israeli Constitution, a prime minister can be indicted and continue to serve.
Yeah.
Just about the only way. There was a pretty good piece by Isabel Kirshner of the New York Times, and she's been a longtime correspondent in Jerusalem, talking about what could happen from here. It's almost like a flow chart. And the only solution that sounds like it removes him from power is if his own party removes him from leadership. Yeah. And then he can't be the prime minister. The Likud can still be in charge of forming a government, or it can be players in the government. But if he's not the leader of Likud, he's not going to be the prime minister. That's just about the only way. The courts the Supreme Court of Israel has been reluctant to judge and extend its power. The parliament, the Knesset, is very reluctant to come together with a unanimous voice and kick anybody out. And there's nothing in the Constitution that says he can't be indicted and, as somebody put it, go to court from 9 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, and then after that be prime minister. There's nothing that says he has to go.
This will not come, next day or something.
Yeah.
They have taken 5 years for their investigation, but they have their proofs now, and I think that I still believe, it's a justice system in Israel is working and independent.
Right. Yes, but it's also the same week where his opponent cannot form a government, and maybe we're going to new general elections. So maybe he will say this to go back, let's say, to the voice of the electors.
And on that score, Benjamin Netanyahu in hot water, but still has a friend in the White House. Cue Monday evening's announcement from Washington.
After carefully studying all sides of the legal debate, this administration agrees with President Reagan. The establishment of Israeli civilian settlements in the West Bank is not, per se, inconsistent with international law.
Amar Abadrabo, is that going to move the dial?
It's the second move totally defying the international community and the rules that have been ruling the world since World War II. After saying that Jerusalem was capital of Israel, the same administration, the U.S. administration alone in the world, is now saying that settlements are fine, while everybody say settlements are not fine. They're outlawed. And the same week also, it's very interesting that in Europe, in the same week, there is a ruling that's quite important that says that products in the supermarket should be labeled that coming from Israeli colonies. It's something, or settlements.
Some say that may have been part of the push.
Yeah, maybe, but it's again, it's supporting an outlaw decision. It's terrible.
Yeah. On the other hand, there's a pretty low bar set when the U.S. says, well, it's not inconsistent with international law. That may be. I mean, there's arguments on both sides of that, notably over whether Jordan really did have sovereignty over that territory. But on the other hand, is that really the standard you want to apply? Well, we didn't break a law. Is it good for peace? Is it good for the region? Is it good for stability? Is it the right thing to do? That's a whole other set of arguments. And that's where the part of the international community is coming down and why it is couching its disapproval of the settlements in the way that it is. Yeah, I mean, back to Bibi and Trump for a minute. If you've got 2 minutes to spare, it's a pretty good idea to read some of the opinion columns in the New York Times. One of them from, and I'm going to miss the name, Bret Stephens, talks a little bit about how this actually could create, the idea that the settlements are okay, could create room to negotiate some kind of better two-state solution or some kind of more peaceful accord in the region. It's something that puts it on the table.
Many of my friends who really know the file say that the two-state solution has been dead for a long time now. Okay. It's and by supporting those settlements, I mean, just looking on the map, you can see that the way the settlements are done is a total killing the two-state solution.
Yeah. Okay.
So we'll have to find something else.
Yeah. Okay.
6 days on, internet service in Iran mostly remains in the dark. A sudden cut in fuel subsidies sparking an immediate backlash in a nation already crippled by sanctions. Images like this one of protesters cheering as a building goes up in flames in Bebahan, that's in Khuzestan province, date back to last Saturday before the internet shut down. It's back to 15% the internet of what it should be, according to monitors. Amnesty International stated earlier this week it had cross-checked the killing of more than 100 people, most of them in oil-rich Khuzestan. There's also Kermanshah province and the outer suburbs of the capital, Tehran. There's really two aspects to this story, Dorian Malovic, which is, on the one hand, this lifting of these the easing of those fuel subsidies, and then the way that the internet has been shut off so effectively. Some comparing it to China.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think the idea of shutting internet, I mean, or to put it under surveillance, because the technology used might be connected with the China technology that Iran bought to China, because the official ministers or bureaus and everything still have internet. That means they have the possibility, I mean, to find a behind-the-wall system to keep internet for the officials and cut it for the whole population. And I think for me, the first point, very interesting, that you can manage that, which is not a low-level technological success. I mean, it's really very sophisticated. Then now, I think what's terrible is that you can have that, like in China, it's the same. You cannot have a pretty good idea of what's going on in many provinces if people are protesting against chemical factories or social against the price of the pork or whatever. You don't have a lot of ideas. You don't have any ideas of what's going on inside, even though you can get a VPN. I don't know whether even in Iran you can get VPN. Some of them manage, but it's not like not like VPN. It's just like you don't have any connection. Yes. Right. So that means even for VPN doesn't work.
It's been difficult for our team at the France 24
even
Observers.
Satellite, right?
We're gonna pick up on this. We're gonna come back, take a quick break. You're watching The World This Week. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. We're in the company of Anne Baggemery, reporter and news editor. Welcome back as well to Georg Blume, Paris correspondent for Die Zeit. Dorian Malovic, Asia editor, French daily newspaper La Croix, and freelance photo reporter Amar Abed Rabo. We were talking just before the break, Amar, about what's going on inside of Iran. They cut these fuel subsidies. Iran has some of the lowest prices on petrol. Overnight, suddenly, they have empty coffers at the state right now.
It's we see, first of all, the economic issue, but then very quickly people are shouting against the Murshid, the guide of the revolution. So it's something a bit more. They say, stop supporting Iraq, stop supporting Lebanon, take care of Iran. There is a real challenge, let's say, of the policy. It's not just about the fuel. Fuel is like the last drop, like it was in Lebanon with the WhatsApp tax that also sparkled everything. What's interesting with the censorship issue is that it really shows that the mullah regime is weak. They're very weak to do that. If you're strong, you can tell people, talk, do whatever you want, we don't care. But they're very weak. They're scared about anything, any image that could go out. And still, we do have images. So these things don't work anymore.
Well, the image is tough to come by, and it is very different. And a decade ago, when it was the Green Movement in Tehran, it was the middle classes. We had a whiff of it in December of 2017 when a rise in egg prices sparked protests in more working class neighborhoods in cities. And now this with close to 100 cities affected, according to the government. And big crackdown by the looks of it.
Yeah, it's there's a wave of economic populism sweeping across the world, and it's not too surprising that it erupts in this way, even for something seemingly small. It's not small at all. The IMF has already announced that the world is in a secular global slowdown. There is not going to be as much pie for everyone. And in circumstances like that, if there's already a current of dissatisfaction with the government, a sense that things are deeply unfair, whether or not you agree with whoever's making that argument, if there is that sense, people do feel as though their government should treat them fairly.
And this in a nation that's under U.S. sanctions.
And it doesn't take much.
Exactly. I mean, you can't really generalize the economic situation in Iran. The economy has been down for 9% during this year. And I mean, a civil servant who was earning $2,000 in January earns $500 now. It's really a dramatic economic crisis. And yes, there will be. I mean, there's criticism of the government. That's natural. But the crisis has also been, created by our blockage and also the promises Europeans have given that exports will be possible. They cannot export, 2/3 of the oil, and they want to export. So there's a big danger. This also turns not only against the mullahs, but because, in the way usual people in Iran think, against globalization, against the West in general, because it's first of all an economic attack.
I agree, but that's what's interesting. I mean, the Iranian power, as far as I know, I mean, they could tell the people so far, it's because of the U.S. It's because of the U.S. sanctions that you are suffering. And so the people would buy it to a certain extent. Life was not easy, but it was, not because of our government. What is strange and very interesting now is that now the people tends to go against the power, asking, as you said, okay, stop looking around at the foreign countries, now we need it. So that means the sanctions are biting a lot. As always, the sanctions touch the people. I mean, we've talked about North Korea. The people are suffering. I agree with you. Yeah. But then now they have the courage to say to the government, now we don't buy anymore this pretext of U.S.,
To go back to the story just before, I mean, we laugh a lot about Trump, but maybe we might one day wake up and say, it's working. The sanctions, the tough sanctions on Iran are working. We don't know yet. It's too early. Yeah. But if the mullah regime does suffer from all this, we might say, and I would hate to say it, but we might say, thank you, Donald.
All right. Speaking of protests, it's Independence Day in Lebanon, with the country marking 76 years of self-rule with its usual military parade, perhaps a nod to its former status as a French protectorate. They had to use a different route than usual, and it was more low-key. That's because an unprecedented leaderless movement that rejects the sectarian power-sharing status quo has countered with a festive civil parade. The country's president taking this in a dour fashion. You saw him in those earlier images, flanked by a prime minister who's resigned 3 weeks ago. He's telling the protesters, take it to the next phase.
I reiterate my call to the protesters to take a closer look at their actual demands and ways to implement them, because dialogue alone is the right way to resolve crises.
Let's have dialogue. Your response, Amar Abu.
It's very funny because Aoun has been kind of ignoring the whole thing for like the first 2 weeks, and then he couldn't stop the resignation of the prime minister. So then he, let's say, acknowledged it, but then he said something like, this is not very important. And now he said, what are you asking for? While everybody know what the people is asking for. I mean, you go in the streets, you open TVs, you open Facebook, Twitter.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. They want a technocratic government.
They want technocratic government. They want a reform of the voting system. They want new general elections. There is like 10 steps, very clear. They want people who are responsible of looting the money to be
and you're just
arrested.
You're just back from Beirut. Last week, we were talking at this time about Iraq, where Protesters have been defying bullets. Hasn't been the case so far in Lebanon. What's been the mood?
It's not the same because, first of all, this is a country.
These are images that
yes,
the pictures that you've taken.
Oh, wow.
Exactly.
Oh, right.
So, first of all, they've been into 15 years of civil war. Not this generation, but my generation, let's say. So they are very careful about not using weapons.
In Hong Kong.
Yes, the anonymous.
Yes.
So you can't identify them.
Yes.
What is very interesting in this picture, for instance, is that there are so many different categories demonstrating. You know, all religions are demonstrating. All Lebanese are together. Young ones, veiled, not veiled. A lot of women, but also men. This is in Tripoli, in the north. You'll be amazed sometimes by also some very extremely rich people who are demonstrating also. It's not just like the poor revolution.
And from the outside, is it really as it's been billed, where people in the north, which is more Sunni, have been chanting their solidarity with those in the south, which is more Shia? It really is like that?
It is like that. I've seen people who've never been to Tripoli, from Beirut. Christians from Beirut, they've never been there. For them, it's like, they used to call it Kandahar, you know, like Afghanistan. And now they go, and they realize they're the same. They're just the same, you know. They cry with them, they hug them, they talk to them. For me, this is the first, let's say, it's the end of the Civil War. It's really
the end of the Civil War.
It's the first step towards the end of the Civil War, which is 30 years later, you know. But for 30 years, all the political parties and the militia leaders didn't really try to make any move.
But there are a lot of vested interests. Aren't people going to try at some point to
make
stoke
huge money.
The sectarian tensions?
Exactly. They make huge money out of this.
Could there be a bloodbath at some point?
We all hope not, but it could be, because it's, I mean, all these people who make billions, they won't going to leave power, or they're not going to leave a gram of power like this, you know. They're going to fight till the last drop. But they know, in the Lebanese case, they know, because it's not the same as Iraq or Syria, they know that the first one who would shoot on people like this lady who are unarmed and who are just demonstrating peacefully, with all the mobile phones we have now, with all the communication, with all, the first one who would shoot on these people would lose everything. It's the country as before. Before, if you shoot, you're the strong one, you have the power, you can do whatever you want. But today, if you shoot on disarmed people like this, you lose everything.
All right, it's a leaderless movement in Lebanon. It's also a leaderless movement in Hong Kong, which finds itself at a crossroads. First, there's the siege at the campus of Polytechnic University that's on the Kowloon Peninsula. It now appears to be nearing an end, with only a handful of holdouts, at least 8 arrested this Friday, others desperately searching for escape routes. The next test will come on Sunday with local elections, and there people are looking ahead to those elections with the weight of the growing violence on their minds.
I will have to look at their political platforms and positions. Some of them mentioned 5 demands, not one less. I will consider those candidates.
My hope is to show the public opinion to the government through the election.
Now, these local councils, they don't have a lot of power.
Yeah, we have to just to identify those elections. Those elections were not very important. Every 4 years, it's district councillors. You have 18 districts. Hong Kong is not a one city. You have a lot of territories. 18. You have nearly 400 elected district councillors, and you have 1,000 candidates.
But it can send a message.
It can, now, because of what's happening since June, it's another dimension. They are the only free, democratic, universal suffrage election in Hong Kong now. Otherwise, there is none, you know, except for half the LegCo, the assembly, right? But then now, within this turmoil now, they can still be cancelled. There is still tomorrow. The government can decide if there is anything happen tonight or tomorrow night, they can decide we cancel. On Sunday, a lot of police, I would even say military people, because they are dressed like they are raptors, you know, on the poles, you know, everywhere. So it's not so, it's not so sure. But now, if the people vote, you have 400,000 more people registered on the lists. So that means that more than 4 million people out of 7.5 are going to vote. So it's going to be a test, like for anti-government or those who don't dare to talk for the government. We'll see. But it's local issues, practically speaking. Okay.
Yes, I think it feels like the movement has a little bit lost its way, with this kind of last occupation of the university and fight for like the castle, to defend your own castle, and that it's that the leaderlessness really makes the outcome difficult, and pretty positive for the central government, who can just wait until this last insurrection calms down and then let the local elections go by and whatever it takes, and it's you don't see how the democratic voice of Hong Kong will have gained through all of that, and how it's going to reorganize with the students or with another party, and who has come out from that movement as a leader, or it's difficult, and it will make I don't think that the people in Beijing are very unhappy right now.
Well, we cannot consider Hong Kong like another country. It's not a country. It's not Lebanon. It's not a state. It's just a territory, a special administrative region. You have a virtual or fake government. It's not a government. It's just like...
But it's got most favored nation trading status, and it's the world's third biggest financial market.
Yes, and that's where the Congress voted for the Human Rights Democracy
in the United
Act
States
unanimously, minus one vote, right? One. That means now it's on the Trump table, and he said 14 minutes, I saved Hong Kong, whatever.
Yeah, he gave an interview to Fox News where he said that he stopped a massacre.
That's interesting. I mean, if he really puts pressure on the Chinese government to say, if you do something, the trade issue is going to come up, that's a good thing.
I don't disagree with what you said on the domestic side for Hong Kong people. I mean, the leaderless. They had the 2014 demonstration and everything. They had a leader. They were not united. The people say, oh no violence, so they were just separated, it failed. But now they learn, now the people in Hong Kong, 80% of the people are for the changes. Public opinion. Doesn't mean it's going to change. The pressure, the outside pressure, I agree, we do something. So if Trump sign it, but there is another story, if he doesn't veto...
Well, he said... he didn't say to Fox News whether or not he'd veto, but he did say, quote, we have to stand with Hong Kong, but I'm also standing with President Xi.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. Okay, that's the equation. So what?
But to say that's basically, first of all, a good thing. The United States shouldn't make war to China about Hong Kong, or even, talk about, really raise the issues like that. We have to depend on the Hong Kong students doing their own thing, and we cannot just get involved in.
No, just mention
otherwise.
Hong Kong is just Hong Kong, but it's not Hong Kong. It's the last barrier, and then after you have Taiwan, which is another big thing. So the way you treat and manage the thing with Hong Kong will definitely have an impact on how the US is going to treat and manage Taiwan, which is another case.
And one final question on this, Dorian, because you've done a lot of reporting there this year.
Yeah, so many.
Xi Jinping, firmest grip on power of any Chinese leader since Mao.
No, same as what he said about Iran. But we don't know how long it can last. I mean, it's supposed to be a very strong power. But as we said, the New York Times scoop on Sunday about the Uyghurs, Xinjiang's papers.
Yeah, some Chinese official leaked all these documents.
First.
Yeah.
And the last point of those documents, many Chinese officials in Xinjiang didn't want to implement this repression on the Uyghurs. And they were arrested and put to jail. So that means we know there are a lot of division in China about Xi Jinping's way of handling Tibet, Xinjiang, and Hong Kong. So, but it can last another few months, another few years. We don't know.
I just talked this week to French Nobel Prize winner Esther Duflo about China, and she is just fascinating how China's managed pollution in the last years. 5 years ago, the dirtiest cities of the world were in China. Today, they're in India. It has saved millions of lives in China that they are clean now. People who die from air pollution.
They are burning.
And we have to always balance our view on China.
The most coal in the world is China now. It's just you cannot believe what the Chinese are telling you. It always starts like a dream and ends like a nightmare.
Everybody
it's always
agrees
the
that
same
you
story.
can breathe again in Chinese cities.
No, it's not true. Ralph Farin, our former prime minister, say, "Oh, look at the way they resolve the pollution." It's not
talk
true.
To Greenpeace, they say the same thing.
Look at the rivers. Look at the oceans.
Talk to Greenpeace about air pollution in China, how much it has been improved in the last year.
There is not only air pollution, you have also the agriculture, the land and the rivers.
Yes.
And
you have China as a country that invests the most in renewable energy, while France isn't doing anything about it.
And they're still investing in coal, and they are burning coals more than any country like Germany. Yeah. Same.
He was run out of Manchester United on a rail, but lo and behold, Jose Mourinho is back in the Premiership. The special one, as he was known when he first burst into English football at Chelsea 15 years ago, is back, this time at struggling Spurs.
I also made mistakes, and I'm not going to make the same mistakes. I'm going to make new mistakes, not the same mistakes. So I had time. I think I'm stronger. Players, the best gift is the ones that are here. I don't need players. I don't need players. I'm so happy with the players I have. I just need time to understand them better, to know everything about them. Because I always say, you only know a player when you work with them.
I've learned from my mistakes. We talked earlier about personalities that are a reporter's dream, and it's true, every press conference of Jose Mourinho, you're sure to come away with something. But okay, he's no longer this young genius. He's 56 years old. He's had lots of stints in England, in Spain, and in Italy. Is he still the special one, Anne Bagamaray?
He doesn't even think he's the special one. He claims he never actually said that. Who knows if it's true? No, he's been talking more and more about how he's the humble one.
Right.
He's going to come at this and work with the players that he's got and be a good citizen of Tottenham. Okay, that's left to be seen. If you want to judge someone on his or her record, I think that's probably a pretty good way to start. And a lot of people are saying, and if you just look at his record, you probably would say too, his best years are way behind him. His last 3 stints at Man United, at Chelsea,
Real Madrid
were short and brutish and pretty nasty. Also, in all of those places, he had management and owners who were willing to spend big for whatever players he wanted to get the job done quickly. Now he's gone to Tottenham with a management that tosses nickels around like manhole covers, as we say in America, and isn't necessarily going to want to go out and buy
I liked him when he was in Porto, and now he's again coaching the underdogs. So why not?
But Georg, what does it tell you that what made him special partly was here he was with these overpriced players. Telling him what to do and throwing his weight around. Today, the manager that everybody worships in the Premiership is Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool, and he's got this much more down to earth. It's a completely different way of approaching the job.
Yeah, Jurgen Klopp is a friend of everybody, and he has managed to do so.
But why is it the age of Klopp and not the age of Mourinho anymore?
Yeah, because Klopp has understood how Guardiola has coached Barcelona, and and Mourinho has never done that.
I don't know. I think you can talk about, is he the special one? You can also talk about, is he too big to fail? He's got another great gig. Someone with his record, without his personality, without his long past record, might just be collecting unemployment right now and not living at the Lowry. That's a really good, interesting question. Where is he going to live in Tottenham? In Manchester, he had a suite.
Liverpool,
he had
in London, sorry.
He had the biggest suite in the best 5-star hotel in the city.
Okay. Well, we'll see where he parks his bags and how long he's there. I want to thank you, Anne Bagamaray. I want to thank Dorian Malovic, Amar Abed Rabo, Georg Bluma. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to Catalina Marchant.
Hello, Francois.
Earlier we saw Trump, reading from that script. It's not often that he reads from the script. And
no.
He did the same thing, by the way, again, when he went to this Apple factory that he visited in Texas.
Yes, so on Wednesday he visited an Apple factory in Texas with Apple CEO Tim Cook. And he later tweeted, "Today opened a major Apple manufacturing plant in Texas that will bring high-paying jobs back to America." So the only problem with this tweet is that this company has actually been running since 2013. It is owned by Flex, and they have been creating Apple computers since 2013.
He was still laughing.
A lot of people are wondering why Apple hasn't corrected the statement or why Tim Cook hasn't said anything. As you can see, this Twitter user saying Tim Cook spoke immediately after him and did not correct the record, but I think he was just trying to be polite.
If there's a trade war going on with China, I think it's not in his interest to open his mouth.
No, he wants to stay on his good side to have for the tariffs.
Right.
But we do have this tweet from 2013 from Tim Cook. So even though he hasn't said anything, there is proof. There's online proof.
All right, that the factory did exist before Donald Trump.
Yes. This isn't the first time, though, that he has exaggerated comments. Just last year, he said that Ivanka created 14 million jobs, when in fact the entire economy since he took office has only added 6 million jobs to the economy.
And Bagger-Murray?
Someday you're going to see a big smile on Tim Cook's face, just like on Gordon Sondland's. He's going to be able to say whatever he wants and not worry about the consequences of having offended Donald Trump. It's going to be a great day.
So another story you've been following involves Coldplay.
Yes, so Coldplay just announced to the BBC that they will not be touring to promote their new album because they said that it would not be environmentally beneficial. They
could tour Europe by train.
Well, they will be doing their last tour on London, but they said that their dream tour is to have a show with no single-use plastic and to have it largely solar paneled. Powered, and they said they would be taking 2 years off in order to achieve this sustainable tour. But this does bring up the question: what is a band's footprint? And the most recent figures show that live music generates 405,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions only in the UK per year. So this is a big number. But here we also have this pie chart that shows what is the actual carbon footprint of a tour. And you could see that what takes up the larger portion are the venues and audience travel.
Right, so the band traveling is only 9%.
9%.
Okay, all right. So you're saying Coldplay should tour is what you're saying?
We'll see.
Catalina, sitting the fence. Catalina Marchant, I want to thank you. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.